Chapter 23. The night was quiet, not a single crow could be heard. From a dormitory room where the lights were off, voices could be heard. A group of girls were whispering, holding flashlights around a small square table in the dark dormitory. The dim light of the flashlight illuminated the dark bedroom, creating a gloomy/eerie atmosphere. The girl in the lead spoke softly. According to legend, in the ancient East, there was a game that could summon a ghost. The two girls beside her trembled as they looked at her expectantly. "If we want to know anything, we can ask that ghost," she continued. "However, we must respect the summoned ghost. We cannot call it a ghost, but rather a fairy pen." On the small square table was a piece of white paper and a pen. Jacqueline, a little girl, said timidly, "Then what should we do?" "But I don't believe this game can summon M/AQ/U." The little girl named Jacqueline raised her eyebrows in disdain. "If you want to find excitement, you have to do it to the end. Tonight we will invite the fairy pen," she said. "Moreover, don't let it go. We have to see if anything bad happens." The other two little girls looked at each other, hesitating for a long time. Jacqueline impatiently urged, "Hurry up and hold out your hands. Are you scared?" "If everyone has decided to play together," the little girl on the left replied quietly, "I." But their conversation was suddenly interrupted. Someone lifted the bed curtain, stuck his head out, pondered for a moment, and said, "Actually, in the ancient East, besides the fairy pen, there was another game. But it's much more interesting than the fairy pen." The little girl poked her head out with a face as white as snow. Her blue eyes reflected the bloody female ghost behind Jacqueline, calmly adding, "It's a landlord game." Siddle got out of bed. After explaining the rules of the landlord game to her friends, she took out a box of cards from the desk drawer. "Do you guys want to play a few games?" Siddle. Unlike the two little girls who were eager to try the landlord game beside her, Jacqueline's face turned red and she glared at Siddle angrily. "What do you mean? I asked you earlier if everyone wanted to play a game together tonight, and you said you didn't." Jacqueline glared at her angrily, embarrassed to the point of anger. "We were just about to start playing a game, but you interrupted. Are you deliberately targeting me?" Playing the magic pen was Jacqueline's suggestion. Seeing the other two roommates attracted by the deck of cards, she was filled with anger and resentment. Siddle stopped shuffling the cards, raised her head and glanced at Jacqueline gently. "You didn't tell me in advance that you were going to play a psychic game." "You," Jacqueline said angrily and humiliatedly to the two girls beside her. "Between the fairy pen and Siddle's playing cards, which one would you choose?" "With him, there's no me. With me, there's no him." The two girls looked at each other, but before they could say anything to ease the atmosphere, they heard a faint, incomprehensible laugh. Siddle put down the deck of cards and picked up the white paper. The numbers and letters used to summon the fairy pen were all neatly written on the paper. "This is your fairy pen game." She seemed unable to hold back her laughter, tilting her head to look at Jacqueline with a seemingly innocent gaze. "You can only think of such a boring and time-wasting game like this? If you want to see M/A, you don't need to go through so much trouble." Siddle chuckled lightly, suddenly picked up the flashlight, lowered her head. Her long blonde hair fell down in front of her face. A girl with a pale face under the light suddenly appeared in the dark bedroom. Before Jacqueline could react, the pale-faced long-haired girl rushed towards her with a fierce expression, accompanied by a terrified groan. The girl unconsciously widened her eyes in fear and backed away. However, nothing happened. Siddle calmly lowered the flashlight, returned to his normal appearance, and calmly glanced at the frightened Jacqueline. "Are you scared just by that?" She giggled. "A coward like you dares to play psychic tricks? I'm afraid you'll suddenly die in our room." She was answered by a loud slamming of the door. Jacqueline rushed into the bathroom and locked the door. "Siddle," Louise said timidly, "it seems like Jacqueline is angry. What should we do?" She was a timid and weak girl, and when faced with this situation, she didn't know what to do. Another girl, Margot, also looked at Siddle. "It's okay," Siddle calmly continued to shuffle the cards. She looked at the red-clothed ghost who was still squatting in the space behind her. She lowered her long, curved eyelashes and quietly pulled the white paper to summon the fairy pen to her side. If you don't want to play anymore, go to sleep. Of course, the card game was unsuccessful in the end, and the peaceful atmosphere in the dormitory was broken. Margot and Louise went to bed early. Siddle sat up, holding the white paper and groping her way into the bathroom. Knock knock knock. She knocked on the door politely and patiently, and after the third knock, the door was opened forcefully. The little girl standing behind the door had red eyes, and tears were still on her pretty little face. Jacqueline wiped the tears from her face, then coldly turned her head. Siddle had always known that Jacqueline hated her. She even knew why this little girl hated her. For a girl who came from an elite, arrogant, and competitive background, it would be uncomfortable to feel completely overwhelmed by others, whether in exams or social interactions. Although Siddle did not want to be number one, she also did not want to be challenged by the self-righteous Jacqueline with her fierce tone and eyes after each exam ranking was announced. However, even though she did not want to be the top, every time she picked up the exam paper and looked at the questions, she really could not bear to intentionally make mistakes. Because the hardest question in the math test was to calculate the number of chickens and rabbits in the cage. This was a question she had done countless times in elementary school in her previous life. For Siddle, the difficulty was equivalent to 1 plus 1. That said, the competition in China was indeed too fierce. If we talk about achievements, Siddle can understand that she relied on her 10 years of competitive experience to crush the 11 or 12-year-old kids. What she did not expect was that she was actually very famous in this American aristocratic private school. In a secret list circulated among students voted by people without names, Siddle firmly occupied the first place in the list of most wanted friends. This list made Siddle quite confused and vague. The only person she had an impression of in this school, besides her 3 roommates, was only a big brother she met when she first entered the school. That was a boy who liked to cause trouble, had a rich and powerful family, and had a domineering personality. On the first day of school, Siddle saw him bullying a girl. She could not help but go up and tease and provoke him, causing the big brother's younger brother to feel ashamed and humiliated and automatically apologize. The big brother felt that he could not lose face like that, so he invited Siddle to play a solo. He was a boy, but he was a repeater, so he was much stronger than boys his age. But he couldn't beat Siddle. So after 10 minutes, Siddle pressed him to the ground, pointed at the water in the toilet, and asked with a smile, "Do you see what's here?" The boy nodded in fear, his voice still young and choked with emotion, "I see it, I see it." Siddle smiled and said, "Good, your head will appear in there in the next second, do you understand?" In the end, the boss was so scared that he cried. Of course, Siddle didn't really stick his head in the toilet. She still wanted to have a peaceful high school life. If things got too noisy, it would have a bad effect on her. The problem was that after leaving the toilet, this boss seemed to have changed into a different person and became Siddle's loyal fan, even though he absolutely refused to admit it. The one who once shamelessly said, "Girls are boring, even if I jump off here and die / I still won't play with girls," classmate Pansy George started to fawn over Siddle every day, then. When the boy shyly put the love letter in Siddle's desk drawer, and when Siddle found out, she just blankly held the letter and asked in confusion, "Who is this person?" After being told who this person was by her roommate Louise, who was also the girl Pansy bullied when she entered school, Siddle was shocked. "So the person I beat up was him? So he even wrote a love letter to me. Does he have an illness? Like Stockholm Syndrome?" Moreover, Siddle took the letter, was silent for a long time, and finally said tactfully, "It seems like he isn't aware of his own illness." After these words were spread, the big brother's young man's heart was completely hurt. However, beyond Siddle's expectations, from then on, not only did the big brother happily continue to cling to her, but the boys also seemed to think that she was very cool, so one after another rushed over to make friends with her. However, she really had no interest in raising children. In order to get out of this awkward situation that had arisen for no reason, she could only try to maintain her cold image every day. That's why this situation had appeared now. Even the girls in her room thought that Siddle was a cold flower who despised making friends. For example, Jacqueline, she even stubbornly believed that Siddle looked down on them, so she didn't want to make friends with them. Siddle didn't think about explaining. After all, she really didn't want to have a close relationship with the other people in the school. It's just that. Siddle turned on the faucet. She glanced at Jacqueline beside her, who was still washing her face with water, trying to cover up her red and swollen eyes. She lowered her head and looked down, her tone calm as she said, "Jacqueline, I'm not aiming at you, I just don't want to go to the funeral tomorrow." Jacqueline was stunned. "Siddle, what do you mean?" Then she saw Siddle lazily tilt his head, giving her a mysterious and unpredictable smile. "Can't you see?" "Right behind you," Siddle said in a cold voice, her eyes filled with a careless smile, like the light blue glass fragments scattered on the snow, small but sharp. "Can't you see? The woman in red, her face covered in blood, is standing behind you."